more folks are joining, we're going to get started. Really excited to bring back NielsenIQ. They've been a long-term supporter of the Naturally Network, Naturally New York, New England, and all other chapters, providing quarterly programming for our communities. Today, we're going to be addressing the new wellness economy and how GLP-1 is reshaping food, nutrition, and supplements. Very excited to also be co-hosting this with my counterpart, Ali Elliott, who is the community manager at Naturally New England. Ironically, we are twinning today. Wasn't planned, but just goes to show how closely aligned we're collaborating. Someone thinking the same way, right? I'm going to pass it along to Yvonne Wasson and Mike Rigordi to introduce themselves and get started with our presentation. Yvonne?
Thanks, Adrian. Hey, everyone. I'm Yvonne Buisson. I work at NielsenIQ, and where I work with emerging brands in the health and wellness space. And Mike and I are looking forward to sharing with you the highlights from how GLP-1 is impacting the CPG space. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike to introduce himself.
Everybody, I'm Mike McGroarty. I work on Yvonne's team on the health and wellness vertical that we have here at NIQ. I work with emerging brands mostly too. So anybody that's pre-revenue up to $500 million in sales too is kind of who we help out with. So a lot of different life stages, a lot of different cool projects that we're able to work on and with similar brands too. So excited to present on this information and then also connect with anybody afterwards too that is looking for more information. So thank you.
For those who aren't aware, NielsenIQ captures sales in retail as well as consumer purchasing behavior to help brands in retail understand kind of the category trends. So like I said, today, Mike and I are excited to share with you the impact that we're seeing that GLP-1s are having in CPG. To kick it off, though, I'm going to throw out a number, and I invite you guys to take a guess as to what that number is about. 50 million. If you're able to throw into the chat what you think that number is related to, we'd love to see.
Who's going to be the first?
A good guess. Really good guesses. Okay. So really good guesses and very close. So 50 million is the projected number of Americans who will be on a GLP-1 by year 2035. So today, there are roughly 30 million Americans taking a GLP-1. And according to Morgan Stanley, they're projecting that in less than 10 years, there will be 20 more million Americans on a GLP-1. So GLP-1s don't seem to be going anywhere, and there's a lot of conversation around it. And today we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about what we're hearing, what we're seeing. There we go. So to provide some context, GLP-1s have been around for a long time, and we've been studying the behavior of GLP-1 users, initially using for diabetes or to help with diabetes. Since 2023, we've been studying the GLP-1 users who are using that drug for weight management. And you can see there are various ways to look at kind of the behavior and the data. We are looking at different time periods of usage. We're looking at the purposes, so whether a user is using to help manage weight or whether they're using it to support diabetes or both. We're especially looking at the difference in behaviors by type. So that means looking at prescriptions versus compounds. And we partner with management science associates who are able to tie the data to electronic medical records. And what this helps us to do is really pinpoint what is happening when the GLP-1 user starts taking the drug, and then what's going on 60 days later or 90 days later, and so on. So kind of some of the highlights that we've been seeing, and here you're going to see all the different players that are in GLP-1s today. And what's interesting is that early on, users were talking about GLP-1s in terms of brand names. So kind of the conversation was around Ozempic or Mounjaro or Zepbound. And now what we're seeing is consumers are talking about them in terms of mechanisms. So it's a semaglutide. The conversation is around tirzepatide, and even mechanisms that aren't available yet that are waiting for FDA approval. So a lot of shifts in conversation and kind of the understanding of all of this. You can see we're also looking at the different doses and forms. Speaking of forms, the first oral GLP-1 was released earlier this year. And in that short amount of time that it's been available, 34% of consumers expressed interest in this new oral form. And of all of the patients that started taking the oral form in that first month, 36% of them are new to the GLP-1 therapy or space. So a lot of new users coming to the GLP-1 space. We're also looking at the different uses or approved uses, so diabetes or weight management. And we're continuing to learn more about the other benefits of GLP-1. So we're learning that they can help with cardiovascular disease, with heart conditions, kidneys, and even sleep apnea in some cases. Compounding pharmacies play such an important role in this space. When there's a GLP-1 shortage, compounding pharmacies were allowed to come in and kind of help fill that supply gap. And technically, compounding pharmacies were supposed to go away, but they haven't. And you can see in the middle there kind of how the rank of compounding pharmacies has changed over time. Compounding pharmacies, like I said, plays an important role because they are allowing the drug to be more affordable and also, therefore, driving kind of more users to the GLP-1 space. And we're anticipating that these next-gen mechanisms, so the new ones that are awaiting FDA approval, to come on the market and help with conditions beyond weight management and diabetes. So think about burning energy, helping with metabolism, and so on. So there's a lot of anticipation coming and related to those. We're also hearing a lot of conversation around a new dosing, a lot of conversation around consumers cycling off of GLP-1s and then back on. They're also talking about microdosing. We will continue to learn about other health conditions that GLP-1s can support. And we're going to see a shift in conversations around side effects and costs too. In early 2023, when we started looking at GLP-1 usage for weight management, we didn't see a lot of change in behavior. The users were buying the same categories of the same foods, but less. And then when compounding pharmacies came into the scene, it really kind of blew up the social conversation around GLP-1s, and even telehealth companies or platforms are bringing in celebrities and social media influencers, which also drove that conversation to go up. And so we really wanted to understand the conversations that are going on around GLP-1s. So we partnered with Arisma, who can analyze social media content to understand what people are talking about. And as it relates to GLP-1s, we know that users are continuing to talk about diet and supplements, wanting to know about food noise, wanting to know about how to make sure they're taking in the right amount of protein. They're talking about portions and pacing. They're talking about, hey, if I eat less in a day, what kind of vitamins and supplements do I need to take to make sure I'm getting the right amount of nutrients? Conversations around side effects will continue. And in fact, this is where we're uncovering more side effects. So hair loss being a newer one that we've started hearing about, and also dry mouth. Early on, we saw an uptick in sales of candy, mints, and gum. And we finally made the connection that it's due to dry mouth being one of the side effects of being on a GLP-1. A lot of conversation around compounding pharmacies, around kind of the other benefits that GLP-1s will provide help with. And then there's also still a group of consumers who are hesitant to go on a GLP-1. It could be due to cost, could be due to maybe, not knowing what the long-term effects are. And so these consumers are asking like, hey, if I'm not on a GLP-1, what all natural alternatives should I consider? And then really the biggest shift that we're seeing around conversation is that it's the destigmatization of a GLP-1. So GLP-1s really have moved kind of into the mainstream, and there's so much more awareness about it now. And as oral GLP-1s enter the market, and as GLP-1s become more affordable, and as we see more health benefits of GLP-1s, you're going to see kind of the addressable consumer base grow. And then we're also seeing, younger consumers being on GLP-1s, and we're seeing people with lower income. So all of these factors are going to drive, kind of the addressable market to be bigger. So we're saying to CPG manufacturers, think about GLP-1s as a long-term tailwind and an opportunity. And understanding the journey of a GLP-1 user is important too. So before going on a GLP-1, consumers had a level of spend in terms of what they were buying or spending on in the store. When we see them start to go onto a GLP-1, their spend on food actually declines a little bit. But then as they stay on the GLP-1, we see that spend stabilize. And we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail later. Understanding the side effects that come with being on a GLP-1 is going to be important for CPG manufacturers or brands, and as they think about how their products can support a GLP-1 user and all the side effects that they're experiencing. And then we're also seeing a need for almost like a life cycle or behavioral management. So there are consumers that kind of cycle off of a GLP-1 and experience what we call a snapback, where they're gaining that weight back. So there is a need to support these GLP-1 users as they go off and on, and as they take that GLP-1 medication. So what we're saying here for CPG brands and manufacturers to think about is having a portfolio of products that will help the GLP-1 user during the entire time that they're taking that medication, not just when they're getting onto it. How a GLP-1 consumer shops is very, very interesting. They're very intentional in what they buy across the total store, not just in food and beverages. They're really looking for products that will help with protein and fiber and nutrient density. So we're seeing a big opportunity for categories in this space, as well as in the vitamins and supplement space, and the beauty and the health. So the message there for CPG manufacturers and brands is thinking about reformulating, right sizing, and repositioning the products to help these GLP-1 users. The risk to CPG manufacturers is really over correcting based on early data. And what we mean by that is this chart. On the left, well, actually, in a whole, this chart is looking at GLP-1 users who started taking the drug within the past 7 to 11 months. On the left, we're looking at purchasing behavior over a 52-week period of time. So the open circles represent the GLP-1 users using the drug for weight management, and then the solid circles represent the non-GLP-1 users. So you can see that the GLP-1 users are purchasing less and spending less on categories like meat and produce and deli and kind of food overall. But then if you scan to the right, where we're looking at the most recent 13-week period of time, you can see how that purchasing behavior of the GLP-1 user evolves. So what we're seeing is that the categories that have products that are kind of ultra processed or higher calories, these are the categories that are more challenged. And the categories that focus on the protein, the functional nutrition, the fruits and vegetables, these are the categories that have benefited from the GLP-1 users. GLP-1 users, like I said, are much more intentional in what they're purchasing. They're looking for clean label. They're looking for functional nutrition. They're looking for nutrient-dense foods. They're really prioritizing protein and fiber. There's that statistic on the right there that talks about how they are prioritizing fiber. And we see a lot of innovation in this space. You can think about the protein toaster pastries that are out, Think about the no sugar protein bars that we're seeing in the market. Think about the functional beverages that include like real ingredients like coconut water, and then the non-alcoholic beer for the wellness seekers. There's a lot of search for macro and micronutrients. And there's a lot of conversation from the GLP-1 community about portion sizes. They want to buy less and waste less. And also a lot of conversation around how their tastes have changed since being on a GLP-1. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike to talk more about that.
Thank you, Yvonne. So there's obviously concerns and challenges that are still going to exist within the GLP-1 space. So one of those challenges, because people are eating less, it can be hard for them to get the nutrients that they need. Research is pointing out that there are, concerns around magnesium, iron, zinc, vitamin A, D, E, K, B1, B12, and C, all identified as things that they're not getting in their daily diet. So they're trying to source individually. As you can see on the graphic, the pink is going to be the GLP-1 consumer. The blue is going to be any non-GLP-1 households that we're tracking. Looking across the total store, we're seeing a huge focus on nutrient-specific purchases from GLP-1 consumers. So thinking about the opportunity and what this is overall saying, we actually were looking at just food and beverage only to start. And we didn't see consumers making big shifts in purchasing as much as we did when we looked at the total store. So thinking about total store, including that VMS space, those supplements, those vitamins, those minerals, and then also the diet nutrition space too. So what does this tell us? This tells us that consumers are looking for these types of things, but not necessarily making an intentional shift, especially within food and beverage. So in some categories, we see it, but not in all of the categories. It isn't a given, and it's something that you have to look at across each of these verticals that we see. So moving into kind of more of like a graphic and understanding of like what those tastes are changing. So GLP-1 consumers are looking for changes in flavor. The blue here is going to be, think about it as the general population. The pink is going to be the GLP-1 households. So if we dive in a little bit deeper, the bubbles that we're seeing on these charts are then, showing the gap between the general population and then GLP-1 consumers. The higher numbers mean a larger gap or difference in what, different households want or are looking for. And one myth that we think about when we think about GLP-1 consumers is they only want bland food or because they're not eating as much. They don't have an appetite towards certain things. What we're seeing through the data and what you can see on this chart is that that's just not true. What we see instead is a preference for bolder, more complex flavors, as you can see on the data here, but in a cleaner and more intentional kind of format that they're seeing it. So savory, smoky, globally inspired, sweet and tangy, even umami profiles, they all over-index with our GLP-1 consumers, while things like extreme sweetness actually decline. So we're seeing a variance kind of in what those preferences are for these types of consumers. What this does, though, is this opens up opportunity for more sophisticated tastes paired with more nutritional restraint. So although there's less consumption, they are still being intentional about the types of foods that they're eating and what those flavor profiles are going to look like. We've been finding a lot of interesting things within the data, a lot of different trends that we're seeing. Through this, we're seeing, we saw changes in GLP-1 users buying a lot more diet soda prior to going on GLP-1. And then once they made this, once they started utilizing GLP-1, they then switched to zero sugar sodas that we're seeing in here. Is this just a change in sentiment from sweeteners, or is it something more? Well, really, GLP-1s don't just suppress, a consumer's appetite. They literally alter taste. They change perception of foods. And they even change reward signaling too. So think about it as the mentality behind the consumption is even changing. We found that 85% of GLP-1 consumers scored worse on taste tests that they were doing versus their matched controls prior to going on GLP-1. So people are literally changing how they feel about consuming certain types of foods, beverages, etc. We're seeing sweet, salty, and fatty foods can become aversive. We're seeing alcohol, fried foods, and heavily sweetened items often decline sharply after GLP-1. These effects are strongest early in the treatment cycle, but they can recur with cycling on and off medication, as Yvonne was saying. We're seeing those different types of consumers and those different types of uses of GLP-1, and each of them are having a different impact on the consumer too. So you have to be trending closely to seeing what type of a GLP-1 user that is. What does this mean for your product teams? This means that reformulation, flavor balance, and texture all matter more than ever when you're targeting these consumers and trying to adapt throughout this life cycle. On this slide, we're seeing GLP-1 households are becoming some of the most deliberate shoppers in the store. So protein, low sugar, natural ingredients, fiber, clean label, hydration, microbiome support. These all over-index with GLP-1 users versus non-users. They're becoming more intentional about the things that they are purchasing in store today. These attributes aren't just outliers. They're not just on the fringe. They actually overlap heavily with broader wellness trends that we're seeing. So GLP-1s, don't think about them as on their own. Don't think about them as they're creating their own shift. They're actually accelerating shifts that we already saw underway too. So even kind of targeting these different trends that you're seeing will still have an impact on different consumers outside of the space. We see three primary pathways for brands. So the first one being prevention, so products that help consumers manage weight and health before they go on a medication. The second one is onboarding, so companion products. This has been huge in the last couple of years as we've been evaluating this space. Really think about products that support nutrition, they support GI tolerance, muscle health, and then adherence too. The third one that we see is offboarding. So again, step down solutions for cycling, rebounding, long-term maintenance too of these GLP-1 users, really to kind of help balance out on both sides. The biggest winners in this space will be the ones that design solutions across that journey, not just for those beginning users, not for just prevention, not just for onboarding or even offboarding afterwards. Finding a way to create a life cycle solution to these GLP-1 users so that they can stick with the same brand and the same kind of use case throughout their time through this journey. So really just thinking about kind of the key takeaways, what we've covered today, what to think about within this space. GLP-1s aren't new. They've been around for 20 years with well understood mechanisms associated with them. The key is, though, that research is expanding into benefits beyond just weight loss and diabetes. We're thinking about this from different attributes that can be sourced from them, different use cases for these consumers that are going through this process in this life cycle. So the next big question is, if people are eating less, how do we prevent those nutrient gaps? How do I deliver those nutrients that those GLP-1 consumers are being so intentional about finding? Second one is just regulation and availability. This is going to keep evolving, influencing access and usage patterns. We talk so much about the compounding effect too. So thinking about where that availability is going to grow from and who's going to be associated with it. The third trend, consumer behavior and how it's shifting. So users span, a wider range of needs. Some microdose, some cycle on and off. Many users of GLP-1s are doing it intermittently. It's not a fad. It's always going to have some type of impact too on kind of consumers' lives, and it's always changing how people eat and care for their health. And as we were seeing that through those macro trends too, even not just within this space. So in summary, again, consumers are prioritizing protein, hydration, gut health, fiber. These are all core needs accelerated by GLP-1 use that we're seeing today. Overall, it's an evolving conversation. CPG should continue watching it closely as we do more research and around more, finding more nutrients, taste changes, flavor changes, and overall appetites of these consumers. As these behaviors change, We're also expecting changing expectations within food and beverage. And as you think about formulation, take a look at those priorities at the bottom of the slide that we have up here right now. These are all things that more than just GLP-1, users are looking for. GLP-1s don't eliminate eating. They raise expectations for what food should do, and all of us will continue monitoring this quite closely too in the years to come. This wraps up just the content that we have prepared today. We'll open it up for questions also after this. One comment I did want to make, though, before we kind of wrap up on the NIQ content itself, is as you're thinking about these reformulations, as you're going through these changes, it can be hard to be dynamic, and it can be hard to implement these changes quickly too, to stay ahead of the trend as it is kind of changing so quickly. Always feel free to use NIQ as a partner and a resource as you're going through this process. We've developed multiple solutions specifically with this space in mind around quicker formulations, utilizing artificial intelligence based off of historical sentiments of consumers so that we know, hey, if they want a certain flavor, if they want a certain fragrance, smell, taste, anything like that, you can plug it into certain models that we've developed too to help you develop these products quicker. And also just screen ideas before you invest a lot to go down a certain path so that you can see exactly how your brand and your products can kind of fit within this space too when you're evaluating it. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions.
So we got one here from Jamil. What are GLP-1 consumers looking for besides magnesium and calcium?
I think the biggest one.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say too, probably ties on yours too. Outside of magnesium and calcium, just fiber overall too. It's a huge trend that we're seeing. I think that's such a strong point of it because we're seeing it within GLP-1 consumers, but then also the massive protein fad that we've had over the last 2 years now. Fiber is hand in hand with that, with the overall consumption. And I'm talking outside of GLP-1 consumers today too. So I think fiber is such a very safe thing that people are looking for too, but we're seeing it within GLP-1 and then also in the macro environment.
Yeah, and then to add to what Mike said, fiber is huge. And I think that like Mike, I agree with Mike, GLP-1 users or not, fiber is the top. It's like almost like the next protein. But in terms of vitamins and supplements, a lot of GLP-1 users are searching for products that will help with the microbiome, will help with brain health, will help with energy, and in hair and nail growth too, because these are all going to help the side effects that they're experiencing. So we have seen that demand for those products go up. And if you look actually, like I was walking through Target, that vitamins, minerals, and supplement section has just exploded. There are so many options available to consumers.
Thank you.
Chat is blowing up here. So, okay, the next question is, any thoughts on how to ensure the consumer may still be interested in categories like in-store bakery outside of adding protein, given that this is already an indulgent category?
Mike and I aren't the experts, but I was thinking about that question. Fiber is something to consider, but also think about what Mike was showing on the slide regarding flavors. So think about if there's an opportunity to incorporate some of those flavors into your bakery products is kind of where I would start.
I was going to say also too, just from an innovation standpoint, we're seeing so many different type of ingredients to change, like kind of sourcing it out and also lowering that calorie intake that we can always discuss later on. But just things like, obviously we see in protein bars, different types of new sourcing ingredients and things that we're seeing that are actually lowering the calories too, and just delivering better macros for these consumers. I think that is another way that you can kind of still evaluate that, is getting creative with the ingredients that you're sourcing from too.
Curious to hear more about non-alc drinks and if and when people are drinking those more. Adult non-alcs, beer, ready-to-drinks, de-alc wines, etc.
Sorry,
That's a great question.
Sorry, you go, Yvonne. I
No,
misheard
no,
it.
no. I was going to say that's a really good question. Mike and I are not close enough to that space to answer that here, but we could definitely take it as a follow-up. I do know that as a highlight, we have seen that the non-alcoholic drinks have seen an uptick in sales simply because people are kind of shying away from the alcoholic consumption. But yeah, we could take that as a follow-up if people are interested in getting that information or insight.
And the other one too that we just see from our colleague John, who works specifically in the beverage space for us, he talks about too is with the continued legislation that changes state by state is the increase in THC beverage too that we see across the board in that non-alcoholic space as well, just in terms of a macro trend.
How have you seen packaging shifts around this trend and consumption shifts?
I think the biggest thing for us is what we've seen in the last year, and this is associated with GLP-1 and it's also associated across the board. And we heard a lot about this at Expo West too this year, is the almost whitewashing of labels saying that it's clean ingredients, saying that it's better for you too on there. When we find out through maybe lawsuits later on or things like that, that some of these marketing trends and claims that we're seeing on pack aren't as transparent as we kind of first thought they were. In the baby food industry, we're seeing the QR codes, but as it relates to heavy metals too, California requires those labels to have those. I think that what we're seeing in this space is the more transparency that consumers are seeing, the more loyalty that you're going to see from that consumer base. And especially in an emerging environment, which is what I work in, having those loyal shoppers early on is the key in terms of growing the brand too that you'll see. So as much transparency as possible in the ingredients and the claims that you're making, even including in there things like websites or resources or articles too that consumers can jump to, leads to an increase too of that shopper loyalty that we're seeing. So transparency is key from what we're seeing at the beginning of the year, especially. Oh, Adrienne, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. I had an alarm going on here. Erin, I think we addressed your question on alcohol consumption. Jillian, how can a brand with a product that is a GLP-1 companion express it without running into FDA regulation problems? What are some permissible phrases allowed?
This I'm not an expert on in terms of, I don't want to say anything that would get anybody else in trouble. But I can look to our label insight team that we have here at Nielsen IQ. So essentially what they do is they're scanning virtually every label that we're seeing in store. And then government agencies are also utilizing that type of information to make sure that products and brands are compliant too with the info that they're looking at. I can ask and reach out to the team and send as a follow-up some guidelines that they've been giving, because I know that they work closely too in that space. So let me take that as a follow-up and we can kind of send you an article so it's clear and transparent following.
So we have some legal teams also in our community that are actively working on that, if that's of interest. Okay, Emran, where can I find out about specific data about consumer taste changes around coffee?
Right at Nielsen IQ. We have an entire beverage vertical too that specifically focuses within teas, coffees, non-alcoholic beverages, alcoholic beverages, etc. Same thing that I was talking about towards the end in the wrap up too that we had is what we've done is what we've been trying to create, especially too in the emerging brand spaces. It takes a lot of investment, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort to create new tastes, to find new ingredients, to find new trends too, and then implement them into a product that is what consumers look for today too. So what we have is on our innovation team, it's called AI product developer, and then our AI screener. It helps with doing those concept tests at the very beginning, understanding what flavors consumers are actually looking for and what moves the needle for your brand. And then through that AI product developer solution that we have, they work hand in hand. The screener is to understand which ideas are the best ones that you kind of have. And then the product developer piece of it actually simulates what your formulation you want to be like of that product. So one example, and this is kind of like public knowledge, we've done case studies with them, is Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola, that's how they kind of formulated in terms of the beverage and to get the mix too, was through that AI product developer solution. So we can kind of share over what that case study looks like too following the call. It's something to be easy.
Evan's asking if this deck will be shared as a follow-up.
Yes.
And the recording will also be shared. All recordings live on our YouTube channel. So that'll be routed along with their email in case you'd like to follow up with any more questions. Has there been changes to customer discovery or purchase channels, more or less retail versus social and D2C? Great question.
Yes, definitely. We've seen a huge shift in behavior. And I do think that this varies by category, the shift, or by space. In kind of the beauty and health space and wellness space, we see a huge shift towards online. TikTok Shop is a big retailer for these categories. The growth is phenomenal in what they're seeing. I think they're the number 8th or 9th retailer now for wellness and health and beauty. We're, as far as the food and beverages categories go, there is online movement. I don't know that it's as big as what we're seeing in the non-consumable space, but definitely something that we could follow up with or on.
Do we have any data on what the TAM of the GLP-1 consumer base in the USA will grow to in the next 3 to 5 years?
TAM, SAM, SOM, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know the acronym.
Yes, yeah, for the total addressable market, definitely. This is where we layer in our Omni Shopper type of data sets that we're looking at. This is a mix of looking at the POS and then also the online environment too. So whether it's thought leadership that you can find too on Nielsen IQ's website. If you go to the health and wellness page too, I know that they've done some great work on GLP-1, just overall decks too, where they talk more about addressable market. They might even go into a global perspective on there. And then additionally, in terms of if you're looking for a specific market, a specific region or something, if it's not included in that thought leadership that we have, yes, this is something that we could get to and get you a view on too from a total addressable market lens as well.
A lot of great questions here today. Thank you all again for joining. I did drop a link in the chat to get 3 complimentary reports from NIQ's Advisor platform, available to all Naturally New York members and beyond. Anyone else have any other further questions for our panelists? You're also welcome to unmute yourself, raise your hand. Don't be shy. Can we ask? Yes, please. Category specific questions? Sure. Aaron, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, he wants to hear more about protein cookies and snacks.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just sorry, I was echoing there for a second. If there's anything that you want to hear about specifically within them, happy to talk through too following, but just in terms of overall, anything that we're seeing within the protein space obviously has been getting a lot of attention too through the last 2 years, where we're seeing a trend. I think the biggest thing is specifically in snacks, and again, this is a different area of our business, but what I've heard from our colleagues is differentiating yourself in terms of format. Textures are going to be massive too that you're looking for, and then creating those claims, like I said before, transparently about the protein and macros that you're getting to delivered through your labeling, I think is incredibly important. And then, as Yvonne said before during the PowerPoint, the association with high amounts of protein is leading to an extra need for additional fiber too. So I think that the 2 ingredients go hand in hand in terms of the trends that we see. So that's something also to keep in mind for further development down the line.
Just to add on to that, if GLP-1 can affect the appetite, then I'm curious if we also see serving size trending downwards.
That's a great question too. I'm sure something that we can look into also and share over. I know we didn't have any serving size information in here, but it is something that we're tracking also at Nielsen. So definitely could be a good one in there, and we can kind of connect afterwards and take a look at that too.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Anyone else? Still have a little time left. Which demographics are leading the new wave of purchasing?
That on
Is there-
Yvonne, did we have? Sorry.
Well, no. I was gonna ask for clarification. Like, which demographics are leading the new wave of purchasing as it relates to like a GLP-1 user or in general?
I have a feeling it's about GLP-1. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that we have specific breakdowns in this deck about the different demographics, but I do think that with the younger demographic and the lower income demographic coming on to GLP-1s, I think we will see a shift in that too.
Anyone else have any other questions? Is there more plant-based demand?
I saw it a lot in protein powder what was it, end of almost 2 years ago, and then into last year too. That was also during the huge like superfood, super greens that we saw too. A lot of new products were put into development also that we saw afterwards. We're seeing a decline in plant-based meats though. So things of that nature. I know we saw trends last year that were kind of declining for really like just that specific area. I still think that there's going to be a need for plant-based also in the future. There's still going to be a core consumer group. I think as it relates to GLP-1 though, it's all going to be about which nutrients they can get from those products. So some plant-based products might actually provide more from a certain nutrient too, which I think could be an interesting idea and something that we might see trending a little bit more in the back half of the year. But yeah, definitely still think there's a need for it. Saw less of a need for it in terms of like the plant-based meats that we saw last year though.
Maybe tough to answer, but how could a co-man specifically prepare themselves to tackle this trend?
That's a good question. I mean, I really think that if, what we were saying earlier is with GLP-1 users, it's not really about categories. It's less about categories as it is about the needs that these GLP-1 users are looking for support on. So thinking about their interest and their demand for things that will help the microbiome, that will help with GI support, that will help with hair and nail growth, that will help with the brain health and the energy. I would really recommend looking at the side effects as a way to start thinking about, kind of where they can produce products that will help these consumers. And then the other thing, oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, sorry. I was just going to say to add on to your point too, Yvonne, like as they're going through those different phases, like we alluded to in the deck here, having a solution that is through the life cycle, I think is going to be incredibly important, not just addressing one of those needs, but creating the loyalty to the brand by being there for the beginning, middle, and maintenance following stages. I think is going to be a huge key of what consumers look for as they just think about their just overall life cycle throughout their GLP-1 journey.
A little more time. Does anybody else have a question? Panelists?
Yes, thank you also
Ali, for sharing. Yes, fancy food is right around the corner. Naturally Network is actually hosting the largest brand pavilion for the second year in a row. We have over 45 brands exhibiting with us. It's anchored at our booth, number 4916. We will share this information in our follow-up email. But yes, please also stop by to visit NIQ.
Yeah, please stop by and see the team.